LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the January 10th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be taking the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, or which should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the title of the video, my main topic is getting from COVID pandemic to endemic new normal, which you'll see there was this Journal of the American Medical Association article put out by several former members of Biden's COVID task force explaining his strategy, or what his strategy should be, getting from our current pandemic to an endemic where COVID is just part of the normal respiratory illnesses that we deal with on a yearly basis. And I'll be talking about that. And I'll also have a clip at the end of Nancy Pelosi talking about the possibility of reviving Build Back Better, that kind of a follow-up on my video right around Christmas where I said Joe Manchin was the Grinch who stole Biden's agenda because he said he wouldn't vote for the Build Back Better bill. So I'll be talking about that at the end. But first, actually, I want to start with my political comedy as kind of a follow-up from the January 6th insurrection anniversary topic last week. This is on January 6th. Senator Ted Cruz had to go on Fox News' Tucker Carlson program to retract an accurate statement he made about the riots and the insurrection on January 6th, including acts that could be classified as terrorism. And that's something that Ted Cruz has said multiple times. But when he went on Tucker Carlson's show, he retracted it kind of. And I have this whole 4-minute or so clip of the conversation that was excerpted. And the thing is, I watched the entire conversation. What is most ridiculous, what's most comical, that makes this the political comedy clip, is where's the definition of terrorism? They never actually define terrorism, and I will define terrorism for you, as I did in my 2007 video that I will reference after we watch the political comedy from last Thursday on one of the worst shows on television, Tucker Carlson's program on, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This is the kind of thing he does all the time, where he instead of persuading you of something, he starts with a false premise, which is there was no terrorism, nothing that qualifies as terrorism on January 6th. But there's no definition of terrorism anywhere in this conversation that would prove his point. Ted Cruz doesn't do much better, but anyway, I'll talk about all that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
We played this tape for you last time. We were surprised by it. We prefaced it by saying every conservative appreciates Ted Cruz because he's one of the smartest and most articulate people in the Congress, and he's conservative. But he referred publicly to what happened on January 6th as, quote, a violent terror attack. Here it is.
We are approaching a solemn anniversary this week. And it is an anniversary of a violent terrorist attack on the Capitol, where we saw the men and women of law enforcement demonstrate incredible courage, incredible bravery, risk their lives to defend the men and women who serve in this Capitol.
Senator Cruz was game enough to come on tonight. We appreciate that. He joins us now. Senator, thanks so much for coming on. So I guess there are a lot of dumb people in the Congress. You're not one of them. I think you're smarter than I am. And you never use words carelessly. And yet you called this a terror attack when by no definition was it a terror attack. That's a lie. You told that lie on purpose, and I'm wondering why you did.
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me on. When you aired your episode last night, I sent you a text shortly thereafter and said, listen, I'd like to go on because the way I phrased things yesterday, it was sloppy and it was frankly dumb. And
I don't buy that. Whoa.
Well,
I don't buy that. Look, I've known you a long time, since before you went to the Senate. You were a Supreme Court contender. You take words as seriously as any man who's ever served in the Senate. And every word, you repeated that phrase. I do not believe that you used that accidentally. I just don't.
So, Tucker, as a result of my sloppy phrasing, it's caused a lot of people to misunderstand what I meant. Let me tell you what I meant to say. What I was referring to are the limited number of people who engaged in violent attacks against police officers. Now, I think you and I both agree that if you assault a police officer, you should go to jail. That's who I was talking about. And the reason the phrasing was sloppy is I have talked dozens, if not hundreds of times. I've drawn a distinction. I wasn't saying that the thousands of peaceful protesters supporting Donald Trump are somehow terrorists. I wasn't saying the millions of patriots across the country supporting President Trump are terrorists. And that's what a lot of people have misunderstood that comment.
Wait a second, but wait, but hold on. What you just said doesn't make sense. So if somebody assaults a cop, he should be charged and go to jail. I couldn't agree more. We have said that for years. But that person's still not a terrorist. How many people have been charged with terrorism on January 6th? Like, why'd you use that word? You're playing into the other side's characterization that, as Joe Kent just explained, allows them to define an entire population as foreign combatants. And you know that. So why'd you do it?
So, Tucker, let me answer you directly. The reason I use that word, for a decade, I have referred to people who violently assault police officers as terrorists. I've done so over and over and over again. If you look at all the assaults we've seen across the country, I've called that terrorism over and over again. That being said, Tucker, I agree with you. It was a mistake to say that yesterday. And the reason is what you just said, which is we've now had a year of Democrats in the media twisting words and trying to say that all of us are terrorists, trying to say you're a terrorist, I'm a terrorist. And so, look, I don't like people who assault cops, and I stand up and defend cops. And the reason I use that word is that's the word I've always used for people that violently attack cops. But in this context, I get why people were angry, because we've had a year of the corrupt corporate media and Democrats claiming anyone who objected to the election fraud. And by the way, remember what was happening during those protests?
Can I ask, hold on, you work in the, I guess I just don't believe you.
Okay, that's more than enough of that clip. I wanted to keep it playing till where you saw Tucker Carlson claim you're calling them foreign combatants by calling them terrorists, because some people think to be a terrorist you have to be foreign, which that makes no sense. Terrorism is a tactic. And Ted Cruz saying people who assault police officers are terrorists. Well, they might be. It depends on why they did it and the situation. I put a link down in the video description to my 2007 video that's only 30 seconds long. It was one of these YouTube contests to try to get a question. There was a YouTube Republican debate back in 2007 for, the 2008 election. And I asked a question about a war on terrorism question for CNN YouTube Republican debate. And I used this definition of terrorism: a tactic of using violence against non-combatants to achieve political objectives. I kind of shortened it, because I had to get it all into 30 seconds and they didn't use my question for the debate, by the way, but I submitted it. It doesn't have to be political. It could be religious. It could be environmental. There are all sorts of purposes, but it's the use of violence and it's against non-combatants. So it's not like military action. Regular military action isn't terrorism. And one of the points I made, if you watch that whole 30-second video from 2007, is that the American government's bombing of Dresden and Hiroshima, which was targeted at non-combatants and was for a political purpose, even if it's in regular warfare, if you target non-combatants, that could be terrorism. The American government could have engaged in terrorism in Hiroshima and Dresden during World War II. While, I don't know, there's actually, if you ignore one or two facts, you could say that the September 11th attack on the Pentagon was not terrorism, because the Pentagon is a military target. That kind of falls apart because the attack on the Pentagon on September 11th was used a civilian airliner as the weapon, and those, so it was kind of that, in that sense, it was a use of non-combatant. So that isn't the greatest of points there, because there were definitely non-combatants involved. But anyway, in the law of war, police officers are generally not considered combatants unless they're integrated into the military. They're a civilian force, not a military force. So attacking a police officer for a political purpose, that is terrorism. But you never got a definition of terrorism from Tucker Carlson. You do get one from Jake Tapper, who asks, this is, before I get to the news summaries, I'm going to show one more clip on this topic. Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, a Republican, asked by Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union about a very abbreviated version of that clip I just showed, and Jake Tapper kind of gives a definition of terrorism that's a little different, and he calls it Ted Cruz's accurate statement, and he's like questioning Asa Hutchinson, what's up with the Republican Party where Ted Cruz has to go on Fox News and grovel and retract an accurate statement. Anyway, here you can see that exchange between Jake Tapper and Asa Hutchinson on CNN State of the Union yesterday that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
After accurately describing the January 6, 2021 events as a, quote, violent terrorist attack, Texas Senator Ted Cruz went on Fox to apologize and try to walk it back. Take a listen.
The way I phrased things yesterday, it was sloppy and it was frankly dumb. What I was referring to are the limited number of people who engaged in violent attacks against police officers.
We should note Senator Cruz has referred to the events of that day as terrorism more than a dozen times before, he said at that time. Now, the FBI defines domestic terrorism as individuals using force or violence to, quote, further ideological goals, such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. What did you make of that interview? And isn't that exactly what the people who invaded the Capitol were doing, using violence and criminal behavior to further the political goal of, as you note, undermine the election?
Well, let me put it back in a little bit more historical context. I prosecuted, when I was United States Attorney, a domestic terrorism case against white supremacists because they were trying to use violence for their own political purposes. That was an FBI domestic terrorism investigation. Now, we prosecuted them for racketeering, not a terrorism charge, but a racketeering charge. And so you move that forward to January 6th, and I have no doubt that this is considered a domestic terrorism investigation, but at the same time, they're not being charged with terrorism. So it's a lot of wordsmithing going on there. The key is don't minimize what happened. Some people are going to call it an insurrection. Some people are going to call it terrorism. I call it a interference with the lawful transfer of power using violence, and that's wrong. And so let's accept what it is. Let's don't run from it. Let's learn from it, and let's make sure that we don't fall down that path again. For the long term, we have to show that to the world that we're not going to accept that as how we transfer power in elections in America.
Let's turn to COVID, which I know preoccupies a lot of your time.
So you can see Jake Tapper doesn't really follow up, even though Asa Hutchinson kind of said it was terrorism based on Jake Tapper's definition. The interfering with the transfer of political power is a political goal, and it was the use of violence to do that. My one problem with Jake Tapper's definition is it doesn't include anything about non-combatants, because use of violence for political goals in war, like one military force against another military force under the rules of war, that's not terrorism, that's just warfare. So that's the one thing that was missing from Jake Tapper's definition. Now I'm going to get on to my main topic, the pandemic to endemic new normal that apparently is the new Biden administration strategy, or what is a strategy that's being created by some former Biden administration people, and it seems like it's making its way into the Biden administration. And before I get to the newsmaker topics on that, by the way, I'm going to have Rochelle Walensky on Fox News Sunday talking about the immunity you get from vaccination versus the immunity you get from having gotten COVID in the past, which that's a big right-wing talking point, and I see people in my live comments sometimes bring that up, and so I will be addressing that issue when I get to that first newsmaker clip, which is clip number 8. There's a clip list down in the video description, or in the video description there's a short summary of each of the clips, as well as the sources of all my clips, and the source of, there's a link, like I said, to my 2007 video for the CNN YouTube Republican debate or whatever, but before like I said, to begin this topic, I want to start with the news summaries. And as usual, Chuck Todd has the longest and best news summary. Well, actually, CBS News Face the Nation had a good news summary on COVID. It just wasn't at the beginning of the program. It was later in the program. And I'll talk about that when I get to the CBS News summary. But first, here's Chuck Todd with his brief live introduction and then his big, long, pre-recorded package that I think covers like all the different angles of the story that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together from yesterday over here.
Good Sunday morning. As we've said before, as COVID goes, so goes Joe Biden's presidency. And right now, COVID is a major health and political problem. A combination of new variants like Delta and Omicron and stubborn vaccine refusal among millions has led to an all-time high in cases. The 7-day average of confirmed cases is just blown past previous records, and that doesn't even begin to account for people who don't report results of at-home tests or who are asymptomatic. Hospitalizations are spiking as well, but the death rate so far has ticked up much more slowly, owing in part to what appears to be a less severe illness that is caused by Omicron. The public is in a different place, though, than it was a year ago, and the Biden administration is desperately trying to catch up. The CDC has offered confusing and at sometimes contradictory advice. The Supreme Court seems skeptical about the best tool in Biden's toolbox, the vaccine mandates. And stay-at-home guidelines and school closures have given us a feeling of a recurring nightmare. All of it adds up to a big political problem for the president, who pledged to restore confidence in the government's ability to competently handle this crisis.
The new normal is not going to be what it is now. It's going to be better.
President Biden, elected promising to shut down the virus.
The first step I will take were to get control of the virus.
Now faces an unprecedented surge.
The largest influx of patients that we've ever taken care of.
Nearly 1 in 4 hospitals report a critical staffing shortage. At the Luminous Health Doctors Community Medical Center in Maryland, COVID cases are up 925% since Thanksgiving. 70% of the patients are unvaccinated.
It's very tough. A lot of times you just have to take a break, you cry, and you come back, and you do it all over again.
As Omicron spreads, it's already crippling schools, including in Chicago, where schools were canceled this week over an ongoing conflict with the teachers union.
I want my students to learn, I want my children to learn, but I also want us to stay safe.
We will not pay you to abandon your post and your children at a time when they and their families need us most.
Nationwide, flights have been canceled.
How are you feeling?
Angry, because I was supposed to be home yesterday.
Mass transit disrupted. In Los Angeles, so many ambulance crews are out sick. Some COVID patients have been brought to the hospital by fire truck.
And we're in the middle of a tsunami, and in that tsunami, there's a lot of things that are going to get wet that wouldn't in a normal wave.
President Biden is promising 500 million free at-home rapid test kits, but he has promised to fix testing for a year.
We're also expanding testing. We continue to work on making at-home testing available. We're committing $2 billion to purchase nearly 300 million rapid tests. Believe me, it's frustrating to me, but we're making improvements.
And though Mr. Biden promised to restore confidence in the CDC after the Trump White House manipulated public health guidance for political ends, the CDC is under fire for messaging confusion.
I'm very concerned about the CDC towing the line of whether or not we're basing our guidelines on science.
On masking?
Once you are fully vaccinated, 2 weeks after your last dose, you can shed your mask.
The window for boosters?
For up to 6, 8, we don't, perhaps longer.
6 months, 5 months.
And most recently, a change to recommendations that people infected with the virus isolate for 5 days instead of 10 without a testing requirement.
That antigen test was actually not authorized for this purpose, and its information would not be useful.
People are getting concerned about why not test people at that time. I myself feel that that's a reasonable thing to do.
Now, half a dozen former members of President Biden's COVID-19 Transition Advisory Board are calling for a new approach.
It does feel like a bit of a choose-your-own adventure.
And they argue the country needs a national strategy for a new normal, and for COVID testing, surveillance, vaccines, and therapeutics. And joining me now is Mayor Lori Lightfoot of Chicago. Chicago's public schools.
I don't have a clip of Mayor Lori Lightfoot, but I do have a clip from Chuck Todd's discussion with some of those former advisors to President Biden on their strategy to get to a new normal. I'll have a clip of Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, who's brother of Rahm Emanuel and also one of the creators of Obamacare, and advisor to Biden on the COVID pandemic and talking about how to get it to an endemic. I thought, like I said, that was a good news summary. It was critical of the Biden administration, which, some people say NBC doesn't do, but they all, if you watch my weekly programs, my weekly roundups, weekly mix-ups. They used to be roundups, now they're mix-ups. If you watch my weekly Monday media mix-ups and the Sunday clip roundups, live clip roundups before that, that NBC News Meet the Press does criticize Democrats. And you'll hear a lot of those same criticisms in the Fox News Sunday news summary. I actually think that Fox News focused on something that a lot of the other programs missed, certainly in their opening news summary, the only program that covered Supreme Court arguments. I listened to the entire arguments on the two vaccine mandates. I'm saying mandates in quotes because the OSHA rule says that businesses with over 100 employees have to require vaccination or weekly testing. And Bret Baier doesn't say that in his introduction, although later you'll hear Lucas Tomlinson do the report where he does mention that he does give the details, and I don't know. I guess at this point, a lot of people just call it the vaccine mandate, even though it includes the option of testing. I think there's this weird emphasis on how it's going to cost American jobs to have this vaccine mandate, and there's not really a lot of evidence for that, so I'm not sure why that's reported as news. But otherwise, this is actually a fairly good journalistic report, and like I said, even better than Meet the Press. This is like over a minute shorter than the Meet the Press news summary, but manages to get a lot in on what happened at the Supreme Court, which it looks like the Supreme Court's going to strike down the vaccine mandate, the OSHA rule that requires vaccinations or weekly testing. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch Bret Baier and Lucas Tomlinson give the Fox News summary of the news yesterday over here.
From Fox News in Washington, the COVID health emergency facing the nation landed Friday before the 9 members of the U.S. Supreme Court. At issue, the authority of the feds to impose vaccine mandates on tens of millions of workers. Orders on enforcement of a pair of Biden administration mandates could come soon because one rule by OSHA is set to go into effect Monday. Questions from the justices reflecting the national divide over COVID vaccines and the latest surge driven by the Omicron variant. In a moment, we'll talk with the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, about the rise in cases and what's next. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson at the White House on the administration's response to the virus. Lucas?
Brett, any day now we await those 2 decisions from the Supreme Court on vaccine mandates. During oral arguments Friday, the justices took different takes on the value of vaccines.
We know that the best way to prevent spread is for people to get vaccinated.
As I remember in the filings, the younger workers, the 20-year-olds who are unvaccinated are actually safer than the older workers who are vaccinated. So there are obviously some differences.
Last week, a record number of COVID cases, more than 1 million in a single day, despite a majority of Americans fully vaccinated. The OSHA mandate requiring all companies with 100 or more employees to either be vaccinated or undergo weekly testing and wear a mask if unvaccinated was supposed to begin Monday. Enforcement wouldn't go into effect until February 9th. Economists worry the surge in cases could stunt job growth in the coming months.
America's back to work, and there are more historical accomplishments.
But the president, optimistic over the latest jobs report, despite it falling well short of expectations, adding 199,000 jobs. The good news for the White House, unemployment fell to 3.9%. This as the administration scrambles to ramp up testing, despite shortages nationwide. 2 contracts with industry signed late last week to begin production. The White House plans to ship 500 million tests directly to Americans via the Postal Service, which recently asked for a temporary mandate waiver for its 650,000 workers. The Postmaster General says USPS is well prepared to accept and deliver test kits on the first day the program launches. The pandemic also affecting the president's State of the Union address. President Biden has accepted Nancy Pelosi's invitation to give it to a joint session of Congress on March 1st, the latest in modern history. Brett?
Lucas Tomlinson reporting from the White House. Lucas, thank you. Joining us now, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky. Dr. Walensky.
And I will have a clip of Rochelle Walensky there and talking to Bret Baier, and I think I'll even show some bias from Bret Baier because most of the interview with Rochelle Walensky was devoted to cross-examining her on these weird conspiracy theory talking points that you hear from the right all the time. And one of those that actually almost makes sense is the people who've been previously infected with COVID. How come they don't get the same status as vaccinated people? And I mean, that question, there is some validity to that because you do get immunity from getting COVID, but you'll see Rochelle Walensky kind of rebuts even that more reasonable right-wing talking point on the pandemic. Like I said, I thought that I would actually give kudos to Fox News there for their coverage of the Supreme Court arguments. They even had some quotes there. I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip anyway. Now, CNN State of the Union, they did their news summary on a totally different topic. I criticized Fox News a couple weeks back from concentrating on the threat from Russia and the buildup, the military buildup in Ukraine, although there are ongoing talks right now, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken was on multiple programs talking about that, including State of the Union, which may be why they decided to start off the program with the brief news summary. And all the rest of the news summaries are very brief. I'll try to go through them quickly, starting with CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper, the State of the Union this week is what are we in, the Cold War or something like that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is having Cold War flashbacks. The U.S. is entering a series of urgent meetings with Russia this week at one of the most precarious moments with that nation since the fall of the Soviet Union. On Monday, U.S. officials will meet with their Russian counterparts in Geneva in an attempt to de-escalate the crisis over Ukraine, which Russia appears poised to invade, with nearly 100,000 troops stationed on the border of Ukraine and the ability to quickly mobilize twice that many. Following the bilateral meetings in Geneva, representatives from NATO will meet with a Russian delegation in Brussels. The stakes of these meetings are incredibly high. The U.S. is warning of steep sanctions if Russia moves forward to invade, and there are already concerns the Russians are not remotely entering the negotiations in good faith. Joining me now to discuss is Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Secretary Blinken, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, I don't have an Antony Blinken clip. I might cover that if there actually is an invasion of Ukraine. That is actually, I have some expertise in military conflict in Europe. That I have a history degree from Yale University, and I kind of concentrated on modern Western military history. What do I have any books? Oh, here's a good one. From the unification of Germany on. That's when modern military history kind of starts. See how I got this one. Germany, 1866 to 1945. This is one of the books I did. History of Germany. I did a whole bunch of various courses. I did, there's one where I met Condoleezza Rice and Paul Kennedy, who wrote this book called The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers. Did the seminar on grand strategy, and going off onto a big tangent there, but I actually wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind covering something like that, other than the fact that it would be really disastrous and tragic if there was warfare in the middle of Europe in 2022. I thought we were beyond all that, and hopefully this is all just a negotiating strategy on Putin's part. That's a possibility, but 100,000 troops is, you can't deny it's a military threat, and it seems to be getting worse, and I wouldn't be surprised if that became the main topic for one of the upcoming Monday media mix-ups, unfortunately. But anyway, you can tell me what you think about CNN deciding to start their program with the Ukraine story. Maybe it's a bigger story than the other stories. I don't really think so, at least not this week, although I think it may be, like I said, in the future. ABC's This Week, the George Stephanopoulos. CBS News Face the Nation had an even briefer news summary from Margaret Brennan. Almost nothing there. I'll talk about it a little more after we watch together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. It was a sobering first full week of the new year, marked by soaring COVID infections, miserable weather in most of the country, and painful memories evoked by the first anniversary of the January 6th insurrection. But it is a new week, and we want to turn our focus to what is ahead in 2022, particularly in an election year. And there is perhaps no better guest than the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Good morning to you, Madam Speaker.
And like I said at the beginning of the program, that I will end the program with the final newsmaker clip, Nancy Pelosi talking about the possibility of reviving Build Back Better and what might go into the government funding bill. Margaret Brennan had a really brief news summary there, as did ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and I will finish the news summary so I can get to the newsmaker clips with the ABC news summary from George Stephanopoulos yesterday. And I guess before I do that, I should thank Lulu Girl for the Super Chat contribution asking about if anyone at my ACLU office is working on fights for the new voting restrictions. Well, I'll answer that question I guess after we watch the final news summary, which is only 18 seconds long, together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We have a lot to cover today, and we begin with the pandemic that just won't quit. As Omicron sweeps across the country, sending cases to new highs, President Biden is edging toward a new strategy focused on learning to live with COVID. And that's where we begin with our friend Dr. Ashish Jha, Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health.
And I will have a clip of Dr. Ashish Jha talking about the shift from pandemic to endemic and the attempt to get to a new normal that includes COVID. That's clip number 10, if you're following along the list down below. And I'm going to get to Dr. Rochelle Walensky next, but I did say I would try to answer this question from Lulu Girl about my local ACLU office. I'm an ACLU volunteer. I don't speak for the ACLU, except in very rare instances where I get permission to, like sometimes at local city council and county board of supervisor meetings. I will speak as co-chair of the local ACLU chapter. I'm part of the ACLU of Northern California affiliate, and luckily here in California we don't have a lot of voting rights problems. The ACLU of Northern California actually gives money to other affiliates and to the ACLU National to do voting rights fights, which there's a lot going on right now on voting rights with the ACLU. The fight for voting rights, I mean, it's been a huge priority of the ACLU for many years, but I think that it's essential to the preservation of our democracy that was actually one of the topics on the Sunday shows that I decided not to take this week, but it's going to keep coming up. Nancy, if you want to see Nancy Pelosi talk about that, you can go to the CBS News Face the Nation link in the video description, which goes to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel. You can watch that entire Nancy Pelosi interview where she talks about trying to preserve our democracy and the two voting rights bills that I don't know if they're going to have. I'm very skeptical if either of them are going to get passed, either the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to reauthorize the Justice Department to pre-clear changes in voting laws that might have racial discriminatory effects, and then the larger Democratic voting rights bill. We're talking about, was it HR 1 and HR 4, or anyway. But the ACLU is doing a lot to fight for voting rights this year and next year, and I'll probably actually learn more about that. From 2007 to 2019, I actually served as a member of the board of directors of the ACLU of Northern California. And then for the last couple years, 2020 and 21, I was not on the board. But starting this year, I'm starting a new term. I just got reelected to the board of directors. I'm having my orientation meeting this Wednesday, so I'll probably be getting a lot more information about what the ACLU is doing as a member of the board of directors of the ACLU of Northern California, which is the largest of the, 53 ACLU affiliates nationwide. And anyway, I hope that answers your question, Lulu Girl. But now I want to get back to the newsmaker clips. I have several experts talking about COVID and Omicron, and also about moving from pandemic to endemic. But the first clip is actually Rochelle Walensky, the director of the CDC, talking to Bret Baier on Fox News Sunday about this right-wing talking point that it's unfair not to consider people who've been infected with COVID as having immunity, just like people who've been vaccinated. If you've been infected, shouldn't you be able to go everywhere someone who's been vaccinated? And Rochelle Walensky actually addresses that, and I will talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Okay, back to the mandates for a second. People are losing their jobs. More than 220 Marines, sailors, airmen have been kicked out of the military for refusing to get vaccinated. Healthy service members, some of them have circulating antibodies in their blood from past infections, but they're not the antibodies the government recognizes. Is that fair?
I think the thing that's most disruptive to any business or industry is to have half their workforce out because they're sick with COVID. We have seen with the Omicron variant that prior protection protects you less well than it had with the current than it had with prior variants. So having previous infection seems to not protect you as well as against Omicron. Right now, I think the most important thing to do is to protect Americans. We do that by getting them vaccinated and getting them boosted.
Yeah, and I know that's the message, but the Omicron variant is infecting the vaccinated. And the vaccinated are transmitting the virus, correct?
That is true. It's infecting them at a lower rate, and importantly, those people who are vaccinated and infected with Omicron are not the ones who are ending up very sick in the hospital. Those are the people who are unvaccinated.
Right, but will the CDC take natural immunity seriously to study its effect on the big picture? For example, why not include recovery from infection as the equivalent of at least one shot, the way other countries do?
We have taken this very seriously. Several months ago, we provided a scientific brief with dozens of studies, providing the updated science with this. Of course, that science is ever evolving, as has this variant, and so we need to update that science with regard to what we learn about Omicron, which so far has demonstrated that prior infection protects you less well.
As recently as this past week, President Biden called this a pandemic.
So yeah, that's basically the bottom line. Too long didn't read is prior infection protects you less well than vaccination, especially vaccination and getting boosted. I put a link down under sources in the video description to that CDC page that Dr. Rochelle Walensky was talking about. I actually took a screenshot of it here. Yeah, like she said, there's all this evidence. It's if you look at the date, it's from October 29th, so it's been up there for a while. I don't know why Fox News and Bret Baier were, why is he asking a question? He could have found the answer just looking on the CDC page. And basically the thing is that while some people get strong immunity from prior infection, a lot of people get no immunity, and it's much less regular than the immunity that people get from vaccination. It's much less reliable. It's basically, I guess what Bret Baier was suggesting, that, prior infection could be considered like getting one shot. In some ways, if you read the CDC data, I just showed the picture of that. That kind of makes sense in a way, but getting one shot also not very good immunity, and especially prior infections of like the Alpha variant are very poor immunity against Omicron. Being triple vaccinated, like I am, I'm triple. I've had my 2 Pfizer shots and then a Pfizer booster shot. back in when did I get it? Was it November, early November? So yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to address that because I've seen that topic or that question come up in my live comments multiple times about whether natural immunity is just as good as vaccinated immunity, and the short answer is no, it's not. So that's why there's still vaccine requirements, or why you have to show that you've been vaccinated or that you've tested negative, even if you have prior immunity or you have natural immunity from a prior infection. So the next clip I want to show is, I think, one of the best summaries of what I was talking about earlier. These former advisors to the Biden administration talking about how to get to a new normal from pandemic to endemic. Although Chuck Todd makes a big mistake here, which he's corrected by Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel. But I won't give you a spoiler as to Chuck Todd's mistake, but you'll hear the correction, and I'll talk about this entire concept of pandemic to endemic and the new normal after we watch Chuck Todd and Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel talk about it together over here.
This week, 6 members of President Biden's COVID-19 Transition Advisory Board published opinion articles calling for the administration to take a new approach in fighting COVID. 2 of them are joining me now. Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel is the Vice Provost of Global Initiatives at the University of Pennsylvania. By the way, he's author of the book, Which Country Has the World's Best Healthcare? And Dr. Celine Gounder is an infectious disease specialist and epidemiologist at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine and Bellevue Hospital in New York. Welcome to both of you. Zeke, I want to put up basically almost a bit of the thesis that you had here in these articles. You write this: without a strategic plan for the new normal with endemic COVID-19, more people in the U.S. will unnecessarily experience morbidity and mortality. Health inequities will widen and trillions will be lost from the U.S. economy. This time, the nation must learn and prepare effectively for the future. You guys are saying what others have been saying. This is not a pandemic anymore. It's an endemic. So what changes have to happen now? Zeke, you first.
Well, first, Chuck, I would say we're not yet in the endemic stage. We're still in the pandemic stage. If you've got 1,500 people a day dying from this disease, it's still a pandemic, and Omicron is spreading. We think that over the course of 2022, we will get to an endemic stage, and the plan is, or the proposal is, we need a strategic plan for that covers vaccines, getting more people vaccinated. And the only way to do that, as we've been very clear over time, is mandates. We got voluntarily to about 60%, but to get beyond that, we are going to need the employer mandate that OSHA's put out, the healthcare mandate that CMS has put out. We need to improve our ventilation system. We need to get more therapies and get the link between a positive test and getting a therapy much closer, so you can actually start in 3 days and not only the rich and well-off get it. Those are the kinds of things we need to put in place over the next 3 months to be prepared when COVID is really just in the air, like RSV, another respiratory virus, like influenza, like adenovirus, all the respiratory viruses. It's going to be here. We're going to learn to live with it.
Dr. Gounder, should we be prepared that this is going to be a seasonal thing? Meaning...
And really, I should have kept it playing for that whole Q&A, that we might be getting booster shots like every year, like we do for influenza. I get a flu shot every year. Or it might have to be every 4 months, or I mean, they're still figuring out how it's going to turn out, and we don't even know what the next variant is going to be like. But I don't think anyone thought that the worst spike in the coronavirus pandemic was going to be in January 2022. Certainly not last July, when there were a couple weeks there where I felt safe taking my mask off when I was like fully vaccinated, and remember late June, early July, we were going to get independence from the pandemic. Then came Delta, then came Omicron, and there are just things that are unpredictable. But that's the thing about science, is that it's based on empirical evidence and peer-reviewed studies. saw some people like incredulous that I was believing the CDC page about vaccine versus natural infection-induced immunity. And I saw people saying, you really believe that? But what I believe is if you go to that page, and I put a link down in the video description, you go there, you'll see like a whole bunch of peer-reviewed scientific studies. I believe in the scientific method. That doesn't mean that once a study shows something that it never changes. That's not what the scientific method means. It's especially with a novel coronavirus that is mutating, things are obviously going to change, and maybe people should be more clear about that's what science means, but that's what you trust there, and you trust the science based on peer-reviewed academic papers like you'll find referenced on that CDC page. But before I finish this topic, I have one more. Before I finish my criticism of that last clip, I went off on that whole tangent about trusting the CDC and Rochelle Walensky as to vaccine immunity versus naturally acquired immunity from prior infection. But do you see how Chuck Todd started his questioning of Ezekiel Emanuel by saying, we're kind of gone from pandemic to endemic now, and he got like slapped down on that. No, there's still like 1,500 people dying a day. That's not an endemic. That's still a pandemic. And watching that, I often defend Chuck Todd, but I can't really defend him in this case because I have to wonder, if you watch the news summary that he narrated, I showed earlier with his live introduction and then the pre-recorded package, he actually talked about the former Biden administration officials who were trying to get the strategy to get to the new normal pandemic to endemic. He reported on all that in the news summary. He has like all these he has some of them on as experts to talk about that topic, and yet he goes through all that preparation and he doesn't know the difference between pandemic and endemic with his first question. That's actually kind of embarrassing if you think about it. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And then my final newsmaker clip on this topic before I show the Nancy Pelosi clip at the end, I promised. Before my bonus Dash and Sandy clip. That's not a newsmaker clip, but for the dandy fans out there, I do have one of those as well. But here's Dr. Ashish Jha from Brown University, one of the Ivy League universities, having outed myself as someone who got an undergraduate degree from the Ivy League. Earlier, I saw someone say, like praising the way I was not overemphasizing my credentials there. I don't know what you haven't seen my transcript, I guess. But anyway, this is I kind of like Brown University. I actually visited a bunch of Ivy League universities when I was applying to college, including Brown University, and I kind of liked it. But I did not go to Brown University. But Dr. Ashish Jha is also talking to ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos about the state of the Omicron pandemic and this strategy to get to a new normal over in the final clip on the main topic that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Yeah, and there's so much confusion and fatigue out there. What's your best assessment of where things stand with Omicron right now and where it's headed?
Good morning, George. Thank you for having me back. We're obviously in the middle of a really bad surge right now. We're seeing two sets of things happening. A lot of vaccinated people getting infected who are doing fine, largely avoiding getting particularly sick, avoiding the hospital. A lot of unvaccinated people and high-risk people who have not gotten boosted, and they're really filling up the hospitals. And so our hospital systems are under a lot of stress. I expect this surge to peak in the next couple of weeks. It'll peak in different places in America at different times. But once we get into February, I really do expect much, much lower case numbers. And then we have to start thinking about a long-term strategy for how do we manage this virus and not go from surge to surge, feeling like we don't really have a longer-term approach.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. We know that a group of President Biden's outside medical advisors published an article in the AMA Journal this week. They called for a new strategy like that, focus on learning to live with a certain level of the virus rather than eradicating it. They call this a new normal that recognizes that COVID is just one of several respiratory viruses. So, first of all, do you agree with that? It sounds like you do. And what are the implications of that? What would that mean in practical terms?
Yeah, I do agree with that. COVID obviously has been pretty devastating. 850,000 Americans have died. But we now have effective vaccines. And with the latest surge, we're going to have more Americans with immunity. Some earned the hard way through infection. Over the long run, we have to look at COVID along with flu, RSV, other respiratory viruses, and ask some critical questions. Like, how do we keep our hospitals from becoming overwhelmed? How do we keep schools open and safe during this time? And we have the tools now to do those things, improving ventilation, getting more vaccines and therapeutics out. There's a lot we can do to have a long-term strategy that lets our economy function, that lets people live their lives, and really suppresses the level of infection and deaths that we've seen over the last 2 years.
And testing is a big part of that. Do these antigen tests really capture COVID? I mean, Omicron?
They do. They do. Look, the antigen tests remain a very, very effective tool. The one difference we've seen between Omicron and Delta is in that first day of symptoms, it does look like the test is a little less sensitive, but that's for the first day. Beyond the first day, these antigen tests continue to work really effectively. And so I think they are a bedrock of our long-term strategy for managing this virus.
So there you go. And actual good tidbit of information there that I kept that playing so you could see Dr. Ashish Shah say that the one big difference in the testing for Omicron is that the symptoms take an extra, or the positive test may take an extra day to show up. So I don't know if that information is helpful to anyone, but I didn't see that information show up on any of the other shows. So I guess ABC gets credit for bringing that out there. You can let me know what you think about Ashish Shah and Ezekiel Emanuel's plan to move the United States from pandemic to endemic. And it sounds like this latest surge is going to last through January, and maybe by February we'll be in more of a lull where these strategies can be implemented outside of an immediate crisis. But it looks like this month is going to be the time for there to be an immediate crisis in the United States, as there have been in other parts of the world earlier. Now it looks like the Omicron wave is peaking on the East Coast, but it's still going to peak later in other parts of the United States. So anyway, can you hear Sandy barking in the distance? It's getting too close to her feeding time. But before I get to the bonus Dash and Sandy clip, I did promise a clip of Nancy Pelosi as a follow-up to is Joe Manchin the Grinch who stole Joe Biden's agenda? Well, it sounds like there might still be hope, although you hear Nancy Pelosi say she's been talking to Joe Manchin over time, which doesn't sound very recent to me. I saw the head of the Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, on another program, or a couple programs recently, say that she talked to Joe Manchin like the day after he went on Fox News Sunday to kill Build Back Better. And I think maybe Joe Manchin hasn't really engaged in negotiations or talked to anyone since the day after his Fox News Sunday appearance. And I think that's kind of the subtext of what Nancy Pelosi is saying in that part of her answer. But she is the Speaker of the House, so what she's saying here is important to I don't know if any of this is going to happen, but the thing to remember here is the government funding bill that Margaret Brennan's asking about, that has to pass with 60 votes. The reconciliation bill that was supposed to be Build Back Better only requires 50 votes. And I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch this final Newsmaker clip of the program today over here.
When you say legislation for more resources, $6 trillion has already been spent over the course of this, been allocated over the course of this pandemic. Are you saying that you need more coronavirus relief, and will that go in this spending bill when government funding runs out next month?
Well, again, we have to protect the investment. It's there. Most importantly, we have to protect the health of the American people. Now, the administration has not made a formal request for more funding, but it is clear from the opportunity that is there and again, the challenge that is there from the resilience of this virus. And viruses the more they spread, they are transmitted, the more they mutate. So the good advice for everyone to get vaccinated, to be masked, to have spatial distancing, and the rest, and to be tested, continue to be important.
When you have this government funding deadline, the February 18th, I believe it is,
yes,
you have that opportunity to bundle together perhaps some other things here. Will you try to extend the child care tax credit at that time since it has expired?
Well, that's a different bill. That is in the Build Back Better legislation. In the appropriations bill, which is to keep government open, we are in those negotiations now under leadership in our House of Rosa DeLauro, our distinguished chair of the Appropriations Committee, and we must find a solution. Now, I'm an appropriator. That's my culture in Congress, appropriations and intelligence, and I believe that left to their own devices on both sides of the aisle, the appropriators can get the job done. Something like additional funding can be in there. It can be fenced off for emergency, as would be COVID.
Right.
The child tax credit, we have to have that fight, that discussion in the Build Back Better legislation.
So you won't be pulling that out as any kind of standalone or any kind of attachment at this point?
Well, I would hope to, but in order to do this, in order to pass the Build Back Better, it's under reconciliation. We only need 51 votes. The bill that is the appropriations bill requires 60 votes in the Senate. So we have to do what is possible there.
Right. Well, Senator Manchin has made clear it's not possible at this point. It sounds like you are trying to revive those talks. Where is that? Have you spoken to the senator?
Well, I have spoken to the senator over time. I do think there's an agreement to be reached. It's so important for our country, whether we're talking about right now the need for child care for moms and dads whose children may or may not be in school. Child care is so important all the time, more important even now when we're talking about universal pre-K and child care. We're talking about the child tax credit. We're talking about home health care. Right. All of those things. Expand the Affordable Care Act to include those who were not expanded under Medicaid in some of those states. But in addition to that, we see weather, and that weather is telling us that we must do what is in the bill to address the climate crisis, which is causing so many unusual natural disasters, not all of them from climate, but exacerbated by it.
And like I said earlier, if you want to watch the entire Nancy Pelosi interview, the link down in the video description to CBS News Face the Nation, that goes to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel, where the entire program is split up into segments, including you can watch that entire interview. One thing, I saw Margaret Brennan, when she asked about the child tax credit, at one point she called it the child care tax credit, which I don't know if that is why Nancy Pelosi gave the answer she did, because paying for people universal child care, or paying for people's child care and universal pre-K and all that stuff is in Build Back Better. But the child tax credit, that was something that just expired. Not child care tax credit, but child tax credit. That goes to like everyone with a kid within up to a certain income level. Gives them like $300 a month for their extra for their kids, whether they pay taxes or not. Actually cut the child poverty level in the United States in half. Like, I wish it had cut all of the child poverty out of, it's not like we don't have the resources to get rid of child poverty in the United States. So that was when this actually started. That's what I said, why only cut it in half? But at least we did cut it in half, and that just expired. And I don't know why that should go into a big like omnibus spending government funding bill to keep the government going, or in Build Back Better. I think they should just put that as like a separate bill and have Republican, because that's like wildly popular, cuts child poverty in half and sends $300 checks to all these parents every month that helps them deal with the costs of being a parent. Why not just make that a standalone bill and make Republicans vote against it? Because that's a bad vote. That's a bad vote to have on your record. That's the point I wanted to make about that. But anyway, that is the last Newsmaker clip. I did promise a bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. I wanted to, I try to get clips of them interacting, but one of the problems is that they often just like totally ignore each other. They're like, I don't know, ships passing in the night, or like even when I have a clip earlier today of this is Dash coming inside from outside and then Sandy going outside from inside, and they pass right by each other, but they're almost like pretending that they each other they don't exist. And anyway, I'll finish the show with the bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip over here. So there you go, the bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. I hope you appreciate me picking out that clip for you and all the rest of the clips I picked out for the Monday Media Mix-Up. I will be back next Monday, and I'm kind of leaning towards going all the way through the November midterms. I'll keep talking about that as time goes on. I have a Zoom meeting in 2 minutes to help plan this district attorney Sacramento County District Attorney candidate debate. We elect our district attorneys here in California in June, in the June primary 2022, something I've been working on for a while, and I have a weekly Zoom meeting at 5 o'clock local time, which is in 2 minutes, so I should probably finish up, but I will be back next Monday and probably for the rest of the year, and I'll talk more about that January 22nd debate maybe next Monday when it's only a couple days away. And I think I gave a link last week. Maybe I'll give a link again. But anyway, that's why I got to finish up. I'm in a little bit of a rush here. But thank all of you who showed up for the live show. Thanks to my recorded show viewers. Thank you, Tom Trask, for the last minute super chat contribution there. And I guess until next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.